Well, hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Administrative Efficiency via Enrollment Methods. So my name is Glenn. I'm one of the Client Success Managers here at our Calgary home base. And we're also joined by Tom, and a little bit later Tim will be joining in the chat for the webinar. So today we're going to review the different enrollment methods available to you in the attempts to reduce the administrative requirements and workload for your portal. As well, we're going to help maximize the efficiency of those enrollment methods of your choice, and we're going to talk about some of the different items like defining availability rules and options, enrollment types, use cases for enrollment methods, and we're going to close out with a question and answer. Just a few housekeeping items is our support staff is available for any questions, or if you'd like to chat to them during the presentation, and you can send your questions to staff, and they will answer them as they come across them. At the conclusion of the webinar, I will read out the questions and answers, as well as answer any questions that haven't been answered yet. The recording for this webinar will be sent along with the follow-up email, and we're also going to be posting it in the webinar section of the Absorb LMS help desk for your reference. Now, with all that said, let's dive into the webinar. So throughout the webinar, I will be referring to availability rules, which you're likely aware of, but for the newer admins, availability rules are the settings that make a course available or not to specific learners. And this is dependent on certain user fields. So for example, you can use the department or group option when you want to target specific departments, subdepartments, to take a specific course or curriculum, like an HR course, an ID department specific training, or something of the like. You could use a custom field of any kind in this way as well. For example, you could use, a primary skill and a secondary skill to identify users and provide courses. Now, looking at this drop-down menu, you can see that you can target based on a variety of these user fields. You can be as specific or as broad in your refining. You can set availability rules as and/or rules, as we can see in this example. In this way, you can set multiple rules using or rules, where the user must fulfill each correction, either one or the other rule. And within these sets of rules, you can refine by adding an and rule, where the user would need to fulfill all the indicated rules before they can be enrolled or have the option of enrolling. We've also recently added the ability to see how this will affect your user base. Previously, it would only show you how many users you would meet in the rules in total, but now you can see the total of the users that have an existing enrollment and how many would receive a new enrollment. Something to note is that if you use an automatic enrollment rule and the user already has an enrollment, they won't be enrolled again. Speaking of automatic enrollment rules, we're now going to switch gears here and talk to some of the talk in more detail to some of the paths. And we're going to start with the automatic enrollment. So as far as automating your enrollments, the automatic enrollment is one of your greatest tools. The auto enrollment will, like the name says, automatically enroll a learner that meets the criteria of a particular course. Using this feature will reduce your admin workload and management of those enrollments. Any courses, curriculum, or learning path that a group of learners must take can be used with this automatic enrollment. And using these availability rules, you can apply to all the learners that meet the requirements, whether they exist already or they're new users that are coming into the system after the setting has been made. So you as the admin know that even though a course may have been made weeks or months ago, if you added a new user today that meets the requirements of the auto enrollment rule, the course would be added to their enrollments, sending any notifications as determined in the course setting. An example of this would be an intro to the LMS course, or an HR course, or even an IT security course. With clients I've worked with, these are also great examples of when to use the open availability, where there isn't any specific refining rule. What this means is that all users would be automatically enrolled into the course, even if they didn't already have an enrollment. This would carry on to enroll any new users in the system going forward, ensuring that all your users have these key introduction or mandated courses. From the learner perspective, depending on the intended setup, they would receive an enrollment message, assuming messages have been enabled, notifying them that they have been enrolled in a course. The course would then appear in their My Courses section on the learner side, ready for them to complete. The primary alternate to automatic enrollments are self-enrollments. When you enable this for a course, it makes it available for enrollment from the catalog. This allows learners to enroll themselves into a particular course or learning path based on the availability rules to refine the users presented with the options. Providing options to the learners so that they can enroll themselves into courses can minimize the admin workload, as the learner has the option to enroll based on the learning path that they'd like to pursue. This also helps with user motivation, as they could choose a course to enroll into and will complete it versus being enrolled automatically or by an administrator. The primary use case for the self-enrollment method would be courses, curriculum, or learning path that are optional for groups of learners. They can browse the available topics and take training as it suits them. No admin intervention is required. You can also use self-enrollment in combination with automatic enrollment rules. For example, a use case I've seen recently was for a mandatory course for an IT team. The course content was set to automatically enroll anyone who is part of the IT department. But the admins deemed that the information could be interesting to other users who wanted to learn about the subject, and so they opened the course up to specific departments for self-enrollment. In this way, they automatically enrolled the IT department, but they gave the option for select other departments to be able to enroll into the content. When setting a course to self-enrollment from the learner perspective, they will appear in the learner's catalog and be available for them to enroll or purchase, which we're going to go into a little bit later. Once they have enrolled, the course will then appear in their My Courses section, ready for them to complete. Now, if you'd like to set up a course that is open for self-enrollment, but you'd like to vet the users coming into the course, you can set enrollment approvals on your self-enrollment courses. Doing so will notify an admin to approve an enrollment prior to granting access to the course. After a learner attempts enrollment into the course, they will receive a message notifying them that their enrollment needs approval from an admin. The learner will not be able to access the course until the assigned admin has approved the enrollment. The learner will then receive a message that the enrollment has been approved or denied, and if the learner is approved, the course will be made available in the My Courses section, ready for them to complete. Admins can also approve enrollments from an email message, but without the need to log into the LMS. But if they would like, they can also go to the course approval report and approve or decline the request or message the user as needed. Another way to allow courses to be available for self-enrollment, but to ensure certain steps are completed before the user can access the content, would be to use the prerequisite feature. Setting this on your self-enroll courses will only allow the enrollment to the course once those prerequisites have been completed, or allow them to enroll, but not take any of the content until they've completed the prereqs. Any course that the learner has not met the prerequisites for will remain locked until they have completed those prereqs. They are informed of what steps need to be taken in order to be able to access this content, and it is the learner's responsibility to meet those prereqs and enroll into the desired courses. This is one of several ways in which you can direct your learners through the intended workflow or learning path. One thing to note here is that availability rules apply, as I mentioned before, in that the user must meet all the availability rules in order to be able to see the course, as well as meet all the prerequisites before the learner can enroll into the course. The current options for prerequisites can be based on course completion, a certificate, or a competency or competency level. Now when I say course completions, that would be referencing a course or certificate as determined by completion in a user transcript, and a competency is an all or nothing prereq, meaning that they must meet all the required competencies listed. Now, if selling your content is something you like to do, you can also set up e-commerce rules for your course that are available via self-enrollment. The course will be available in the learner's catalog, and after purchasing the course, depending on the cart payment rules and email verification rules, the learner will be notified that they have been enrolled into the course and will have access to the course through the My Courses section. There is also the option to have public courses that can be bought by those who may not have a user in your system. In order to use e-commerce, you can let your CSM know, and they can enable the e-commerce feature for your portal at no cost. Once enabled, you can set it up in line with the payment gateway of your choice. Two items to keep in mind is that public courses can be seen by anyone, but the user will still need to make an account to be enrolled. And the second thing to note is that public courses override the availability rules allowing anyone to purchase and enroll into the course. As a supplementary option, an admin with the proper user enroll permissions can also choose to manually enroll users into courses individually. This would be useful when availability rules do not match a set of users or anything that could be identified within the user setup. Similar to the other enrollments, the learner will be notified that they have been enrolled into the course, and the courses will appear in their My Courses section. Out of all the enrollment methods, the manual enrollment requires the most administration time and effort, which is why I mention it as a supplementary option. However, workflows do vary from client to client, so finding what is optimal for your needs is the best overall choice. With manual enrollments, the availability rules won't come into play, but rather the ability for an admin to enroll a user would be affected by the admin's roles and permissions. Manual enrollment can be done from the course report or enrolling a user into that course, and it can also be done from the user report, selecting a number of users and selecting the courses that you'd like to enroll them into. When you want to have an enrollment or a completion of one course to trigger enrollment in another course, you can use what's called a post-enrollment rule. Once those post-enrollment rules have been set and then subsequently met, the learner will be automatically enrolled into the appropriate training without any admin intervention based on a predefined delay. An example of this would be to provide content in a dedicated learning path where you connect several courses in a chain. Similar to a curricula with paced progress on, you must complete the course in order as defined by the settings. The difference here is that you can put in buffers between the content so as to space the content out and allow the learner time to absorb the information. This could also be used in a way so as not to overwhelm a user by providing training in smaller bites. With ILCs, the rules are slightly different than the other options I mentioned so far, so I'd like to highlight that here. Automatic enrollments aren't available for ILC courses and sessions at the moment. However, they could be made a part of a curriculum which has an auto-enrollment rule. Something else to note is that you can have different self-enrollment rules on the session level than the course level. For example, granting access to one set of users for the course and a different subset of access to a specific session within it. In this way, you can have one ILC course for multiple groups of users and refine their access at the session level. Once the learner is enrolled into the course, either through self-enrollment or admin enrollment, they will need to select a session for that course. The ILC will then appear in their My Courses section after they have enrolled themselves into that course. An admin could also enroll a user into the ILC course and pick a session for them. The next type of enrollment method to discuss are enrollment keys. Enrollment keys are useful in several ways, of which I will highlight two main uses. The first is that you can provide a URL or email to your learner, which then they will use and they can set up their own accounts. The second useful aspect of enrollment keys is that users will be enrolled into the courses based on the learner fields or directly within the key, as you can define a batch of courses that a user would receive upon using the enrollment key. This cuts down on administrative efforts by not having to create each user individually. as well as auto-assign any applicable courses or curriculum that may be specific to a subset of your users. This also streamlines the user creation and simplifies the process for your learners getting into the system. An example of using an enrollment key would be if you have a department of new users that you need to set up in the system. You can use an enrollment key to define in the settings that it will place them to a specific department, along with any other required fields. The user would then be prompted to complete the necessary fields as set by your admins, and the learner is created with the correct courses applied. Enrollment keys are also available and useful for e-commerce in that you can sell courses by allowing the end user to buy several keys for a course, curricula, or bundle, which will provide them an enrollment key that they can then send out to their users. Selling of these courses could be done within the system using the e-commerce settings, or you could manually create various enrollment keys and then externally sell the keys. Depending on the chosen usage, you can report on who, when, and how many times an enrollment key has been used so as to track the success of an email campaign, a selling effort, or a user adoption plan. Depending on the enrollment key setup, the learner will receive a link or a key, and using the enrollment link will take the learner to a sign-up page. If the learner has an account, they can log in and use that user to get that enrollment key applied to them, or they can sign up and then have that enrollment key applied to them as well. If the enrollment key itself is sent to the user must enter the key into the portal to activate the enrollment or user creation. With the use of the new learner experience, you can also set up a public-facing dashboard. On this page, you can add an enrollment key tile that would act as a public enrollment key that you could be used for any new general user that you'd like to send to your portal. The final path to discuss here is the option for re-enrollment. Well, there are primarily three options when it comes to re-enrollment, which are admin, user, and automatic re-enrollment. As an admin, with the appropriate role and permissions, you can re-enroll a user into a course, which could then create a historic enrollment based on what they had completed to that date and create a new enrollment for that course or curricula, setting them back to not started and resetting their lesson progress or their course progress. You can also allow the user to re-enroll into courses. For example, a compliance course like CPR that can be based off of the time that they completed the course, if there's a certificate based on the time before the certificate expires. The final option is to automatically re-enroll based on option 2, based on the time of completion or after or correction or time before certificate expires. There are also several options for integration enrollments, and the options here are quite varied depending on your specific needs, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on it. But on a high level, you can use the Absorb API with GET and POST requests to pull data from the system or update data in the system. For example, enrolling users, updating enrollment status, or updating users. Working with our integrations team, you could also set up a one-time or recurring import of courses and course enrollments, along with other items that could be imported. This is very helpful if you want to connect an external system and its respective enrollments or data with Absorb. You could also use the Absorb Salesforce app, in which you could set up various workflows that would enroll your users, accounts, contacts, and opportunities, as well as sync any of those data back and forth between the Absorb Salesforce app and Absorb. One thing to note is that the course libraries, which you may have heard of like LinkedIn Learning, BizLibrary, and Skillsoft, are similar to a course import option, but with slight differences depending on the course library. And if you have any questions about these options, I would recommend you reach out to your CSM, who can help scope out the request and see if any of these options would meet that need. So that concludes the demonstration portion of this webinar. I hope that you found that information interesting, and I'm going to take some time now to respond to the questions that you've had. Okay, so the question is, can you enable user re-enrollment on an ILC? So this is within the ILC setting. Here, I'll actually take a step back. So you're in the courses report. You're going to edit your instructor-led course. And then within the completion tab, there is the option for allow re-enrollment. So based on this, you can then do time after completion, or if there's a certificate that has an expiration date, you can do time before the certificate expires. And once you've enabled this, either of these options, you can also allow automatic re-enrollment. One thing you'll note is that if you put it on time after completion, but then don't have a time, it won't let you do the automatic enrollment. Okay, so Christine is asking, so a user can re-enroll if either of the allow re-enrollment settings are enabled. So yeah, this one right here, this allows the learner to re-enroll. And then once this is toggled on, it will allow them to re-enroll based on the time after completion, or if there's a certificate that has an expiration date, time before the certificate expires. So like I referenced, this is a really good one I've seen for like CPR or compliance courses. So it will, so for example, I've seen it where it was a 2-year certificate and they said that they wanted them to allow re-enroll 60 days before the certificate expires. So this is something that I have seen common. I have also seen a few people use the automatically re-enroll. Usually they did it at a little bit of a closer date, so like for example 30 days. But yeah, this is pretty handy for those compliance courses.